There's so many rules in 40K, hundreds of events, and constant updates. Skip the learning curve of Warhammer and join the pros. Art of War is led by multiple world champions with decades of success. We teach clinics, stream games, and inspire you to succeed at your favorite hobby. Join our global community of gamers just like you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another tier list. This time, we are doing one of my favorite armies, Mr. Jack. It is the Forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus.
I just can't wait.
I'm the Lord of Mars himself, all right? I earned that title, Best AdMech, in the previous year when AdMech was actually a very strong book. So
unlike right now?
No, I'm just saying, like, the...
because the year just ended.
In previous seasons, AdMech were a good army, but not, like, absolute top tier. This time, AdMech was top tier, so there was a lot of competitions. A lot of people switched to AdMech. I held the throne.
They were probably the most consistently good army through the entire season. Even more so than Drukhari. They just had fewer players.
Yeah, absolutely. Not too many people switched. Some of the other top tier books, like Drukhari, got tons of top players to switch to them. AdMech had a couple, but it's especially after the points increases in the previous balance update in last year, then it kind of dropped off significantly. So this is going to be very much like our tier list for the Necrons, where I went through and mostly focused on the internal balance of the book, right?
Right.
It's too difficult to compare things across the entirety of the game. We can talk about that towards the end, and maybe with some super chats, but we are primarily going to focus on inside the codex, which options are you going to prioritize and why? Yep. And how do they fit into specific builds? So you see over here on the tier list itself, I haven't done the basic SA kind of standard type of tier list. I've put a little more detail into it. Tournament staples, these are going to be units that you see all the time. All right, this is pretty much, you're starting a list, you're going to see this option.
Right.
All right. Strong in most lists is a unit that's very good. It's going to be seen in most lists, but you're probably not seeing multiples of them. And on top of that, there are some types of lists that aren't going to build around it. Right. But you're seeing it more often than not.
You're going to see it, but you can leave it at home with a good justification.
Situational but good is those units where maybe you'll run one or two at most, and they do a particular role, they do it well, but you're not building your army around this. This is like a tech choice type of thing.
Okay. And then overcosted, rarely seen.
You are trying to just have a fun, casual game, and you're going to play this unit because, hey, you'd like it.
Yep. And then the gray YGWY tier is not even for casual games.
Even if you bring it in casual game, you are just seriously handicapping yourself. There's no purpose for this unit. All right, this is Games Workshop somehow messed up on the data sheet. Either the unit doesn't perform any particular role, it's dramatically outperformed by all the other units that are in a similar role, or it's just wildly overcosted to the point where, what is it doing? So Necrons, when we went through that tier list, boy, was a lot of Forge World stuff in there. Jack, you wouldn't believe how many units.
Do Necrons have a Forge World?
They have an entire Forge World line, and you saw it because the Necron tier list had like 50 different units. I didn't even realize they had that many, but it's an insane amount of data sheets. Luckily, AdMech doesn't have a Forge World line. Where's Fires of Syraxis? It should have been out. I want to play all that Forge World stuff that AdMech do have, but no 40k rules. So
no 40k rules.
No
little itty-bitty bots. All
right, Jack, you ready to get into this?
Let's do it.
We've organized.
You know how much I love AdMech and playing against AdMech and talking about AdMech and AdMech in general. It's my favorite thing to do. I love getting just beaten by it.
It was amazing because you got to play like the first couple of games into AdMech because John had been coming back from a tournament. Nick was, doing whatever Nick does, and so you were like, I'm just gonna get all the new practice against AdMech in the war room.
It was great. And I forget what I played first.
A lot of Sisters games.
There were a lot of Sisters games, and then very quickly there were no more Sisters left on that board.
You're like, darn. More Rangers? Didn't predict that.
There are even more Rangers and more Rangers. Yeah, it didn't go well. But here we are now.
Jack's gonna be the voice of, he's above a servitor. Nick is the servitor. Jack is more like the engine seer. He's kind of the tier above. He's actually a tech priest. Okay.
All right.
I'm of course the Lord of Mars, the Fabricator General.
I'd consider myself to be a marshal.
Okay, you want to be the Marshal?
I'll be a Marshal,
you
the Marahal.
The Marahal.
The Marahal.
Classic. All right, let's go and start off. Like I said, we're starting with HQs. We'll go into the troops, then elite choices, fast attacks, heavy support, and then finally flyers and transports.
All right.
Let's go ahead and start with this guy right here. You know him. You love him. He has been the traditional mainstay of AdMech HQs in editions past. He's the Dominus. So what does he exactly do? He is your captain. Reroll a 6-inch aura for your core units of reroll hits of 1. It's a pretty good ability. You see it standard. He's not that expensive. He's able to take one of the Holy Order traits, so he can go ahead and grab something like Magi or Logi to ignore AP 1 and 2. Janitors for the 6s to hit in melee are auto wounds. So he's able to get a Holy Order trait. That's very powerful. Yep. It can also bring CP reduction with that. He can take some of the good Warlord traits or relics. The Col Mechanicus Warlord traits aren't that great. The Skitarii ones are significantly better. But the relics are pretty good. Rayman and the Technomart is a classic on here. If you run in Metallica, I like the Radioactive Emanation -1 toughness aura with the Metallic and Lung relic.
Yeah.
I love that combo. Dominus wants to get into the action, give everybody the rerolls. So, big fan of that.
It's also good to take a Mechanicus, at least one at Mechanicus HQ, so you have access to a Fight's Last.
Exactly. So there is a strategic ploy stratagem. Doesn't work against monsters or vehicles, but against all the other types of units in the game, 1 CP, if you're in engagement range, they fight last. And that stacks really well with a relic, Tempercopia, that you can take on a different unit.
Yeah, a lot of fights last in that book.
Very powerful if you want to engage multiple units in combat. I think the Dominus is pretty darn reasonable. You don't see him in every single list because we'll get to another HQ who does something even cheaper.
I'm pretty sure that you don't usually take him, and the only reason he would be in the tier you're hovering over right now is because other HQs outshine him.
That is the only reason. If he had some other ability on his data sheet that helped improve different units, you would see him more often. Right now, I like him specifically in Metallica because of that combo with the Warlord trait and relic to make him a debuff monster, and he's rerolling 1s for your aggressive elements. I like him there, but in the other armies, you're probably going to see a different HQ choice. So he's pretty good. He's not overcosted. I think he's very reasonable. He's just outshone by some of the other HQs. Yeah. Speaking of which, guess what?
The Manipulus.
The Manipulus. Yeah. What does he do? Well, their guns in melee are kind of mediocre, and if they had obscene guns, these guys would be amazing. But their guns are actually pretty tame compared to some of the other HQ guns out there. What he does do is on the data sheet, he picks a Skitarii Ranger or Vanguard unit or Serberys Raiders and gives them access to plus 6-inch range. Pretty darn useful.
That's pretty useful. That's actually really good.
And extra AP. So those heavy weapons on the Rangers go from AP1 to AP2, and we'll see them later. They have ways to ignore cover. That's just an amazing ability.
So strong. AP1, some armies can just shrug it off, Custodies especially right now.
Yep.
But even Marines, Marines can shrug it off. They have Storm Shields. AP2 plus ignores cover is the break point where nobody can ignore it.
You need abilities that ignore AP1 and 2 in that case.
Yes.
So,
which we'll get to.
We'll get there. But, I did mention it's Logi. Once again, he can take the Holy Order traits. That is just great to have. You're probably going to want at least one in your list. Logi is the best one, in my opinion. But then you can start looking at the other options like Artisans or Janitors and Magi. So, because he's a caddy for that, he's great too. Can like I said, the Warlord traits for the Col Mechanicus are pretty tame compared to the Skitarii ones. So you're not really want to spend CP there. But the relics are pretty good. And once again, like the Dominus, he can access that potential fight last ability. So
he is much, much better than
he's called the tournament staple, in my opinion.
For sure.
I think he's the first HQ. Maybe not the first HQ.
We'll get to another one that you generally see 1 or 2 of in every list, but
let me put it this way. The only time you wouldn't see him is if you're not running Rangers, Vanguard, and Serberys Raiders. If you're not running any of those units, you probably won't see a Manipulus, but at that point...
Skip to the end of the tier list to see where those 3 units fall.
So, so if you are not running those units, a more casual thing, then you can drop the Manipulus down, maybe bring the Dominus instead. But if you're running the most competitive units in the AdMech book, you're running a Manipulus.
Yeah.
All right?
Yep. I just assume his buffs are baked into the Ranger profile. And then every so often you play someone who doesn't take him, and they're like, oh no, I'm not 6 inches more, and I'm not AP -1. You're like,
like, this is actually pretty tame.
Yeah, I can just take it now. I can just tank your shooting now.
Next up is the Engine Seer. He has a data sheet ability to pick a vehicle unit and then give them +1 to hit. It's a pretty pretty good ability. The Tech Priests and the Space Marines have the same ability. There's the 1 CP strat to do it on a second unit, a second vehicle. So you could do it on solo Ironstriders. You can do it on your Scorpius tanks. You can or the Onager Dunecrawler. It's a solid ability. He's much cheaper. He's only 55 base points. He can hold a Holy Order trait. Is a Cult Mechanicus character, so can do the fight last. Not bad. He is decidedly worse than these, though.
Yes.
However, because the vehicles are, in AdMech, I think they're pretty reasonable. He's situational. If you're running double Scorpius, which I did at LVO, I like having the Engine Seer there to make both of them hit on 2s. And he can also carry that second Holy Order trait if you're not running the Dominus. So these two combined can be a nice... I got my 2 Holy Orders. That's 2 CP reductions. And I also get access to their... whatever the trait is.
You generally want at least 2 Holy Orders, right?
Generally.
To get that massive stack of buffs on one unit.
Yep.
Again, I don't generally know which characters have what buffs. I just know that every buff is on one unit. I'm like, oh, they're ignoring AP 1 and 2, right? They're hitting on 2s. They're ignoring the downsides. They ignore cover. They're AP 2. They're max range. They're firing a million shots. They ignore any hit penalties. They just, yes.
So this guy can be a caddy for some of those stuff. It's just his data sheet ability is very tied to what else you're bringing. Whereas you're bringing key units. He's buffing some of the best units that AdMech can bring. This guy is buffing, a tier lower, at least. But still a decent character, and he's cheap. Next up is the Technoarchaeologist. I ran this guy in my old Metallica list that I ran at Games Workshop Orlando. He allows you to pick a core unit, and they can go ahead and shoot and do an action. This ability was not that great over the past couple months. But with the new missions, it is actually a very strong ability to have because a lot of the new Nachman missions in the GT packet have random actions that you want infantry to be doing. Retrieve Nachman data has also changed, so it's a little harder for some of these MSU things, like maybe you would run 4 servitors and they would want to do it. Now you actually want a troop unit being able to do it. So his ability has gone up in value, in my opinion. I still think he is over here, because you don't need to build around it. AdMech has some very cheap 5-man troop units that are also just very strong. I
was going to say, I don't really know... You don't need to do that many actions, and you already want some cheap 5-man units in there just to contest objectives and do things like that. So you're going to have the bodies in the list to do actions that aren't going to be relevant shooting threats.
Yes.
So, I mean, you definitely leave this guy at home.
Exactly.
So.
If for whatever reason you wanted to run like 3 big bricks and condense all those 5-mans down into that, whatever reason you wanted to do a lot more just single trading play actions, in that case, this guy's pretty valuable because he can let you go ahead and do your max damage while also doing an action. But like Jack said, it's all 5-mans are just very good to have.
Yeah.
So you're probably building that into your list anyway, and that reduces his efficiency. But I think he is significantly better in the new missions, because he offers this option.
Yeah, I mean, I think before the new missions, he'd be down in the purple tier.
Yeah. All right, we've got him. This is the last, not the last of
This is the last of the relevant HQs.
Non-named HQs. This is the Marshal. Okay, what does the Marshal do?
Oh boy,
he does a couple things. Jack.
Let me tell you what I do.
He's the lieutenant. All right, so you got the captain over there, the Dominus. He's the lieutenant. 6-inch aura of reroll 1s to wound with your Skitarii core units. So your Rangers, your Sicarians, your Serberys Raiders or Sulfur Hounds. Great ability. Lieutenant aura plus the captain aura. Very efficient army. Well, guess what? He gets access to a relic. Well, he gets access to 2. One of them is extremely good, and that is Exemplar's Eternity. It turns his aura of just a lieutenant into a captain and a lieutenant aura. So reroll hits and wounds.
I was wondering where we get to the reroll hits of 1. I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
It's this guy. He takes a relic, and it's amazing. And guess what? The Skitarii Warlord traits are also amazing. There are several that are extremely powerful. One is Fallback and Shoot, Program Retreat. It comes with a -1 to hit penalty, but guess what? If you run Rayum in the Technomartyr, you ignore all hit and ballistic skill modifiers.
You do.
You typically do.
Yeah. So he's Cawl. I mean, not Cawl. He's Trajan.
He's better than Cawl.
He's Trajan.
And he's 55 points, mind you.
Oh,
he used to be 45. He went up to 55. He's still amazing.
So for 55 points, you get access to great warlord traits. You've access to real 1s to hit and wound, and you didn't even touch on the fact that he makes somebody ignore the downsides of the, what are they called? The Doctrinas?
Yep. So he has a control edict ability. So he picks a unit. they would say, for instance, you're in the +1 ballistic skill army-wide, and then you're sending off Ruststalkers that turn to do some damage. Well, guess what? I'm going to control edict those Ruststalkers. They no longer take the -1 weapon skill.
It's so frustrating because you see multiples of these in lists, and I'm like, all right. So you went into the plus movement thing because you needed to make some plays, but that means I can kill you now because you're in the -1 to your saves. And then you just go, oh, but not them, or them. And I'm just like, oh, but that's all I cared about.
And those are the only units I put in front of you. And guess what? They ignore all
They
that.
just ignore the downsides. It's so frustrating. Or you're in the plus weapon skill one. I'm like, I'm not getting shot that hard. And you're like, well, both bricks that are shooting you right now, they're still hitting you on like 2s. I don't even care.
The Marshal is amazing. The other warlord traits besides program retreat that you're going to be thinking about is Firepoint Telemetry Cache. This gives a unit count as in light cover, even if they're not in terrain. And if models are in terrain, you get an additional +1 to your saving throw. This stacks with the Doctrina, which is army-wide +1 save, which means you can just be sitting on a 1-up. Against,
you could be in a 1-up, you could be on a 2-up.
You could be on a 2-up.
With ignores AP 1 and 2.
Super good.
If you've never played against a 20-man Ranger brick that has a 1-up save, so even if you ignore cover, it doesn't matter. And they have ignores AP 1 and 2, and they have the firepower to just blast you off the board. And if you tag them in combat, they'll just fall back and shoot at -1. Oh wait, I meant they'll ignore that and hit you on 2s. It's so frustrating. And the main thing is that they're not even that expensive. So if you do find a way to burn it down, and there are ways to kill Rangers through this, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
If you do find a way to burn it down, there's a second unit waiting there just going to receive every single buff in the army and just be as big a problem as the last one. And probably kill the thing in your army that could deal with them that just exposed itself to deal with the first brick. It's super annoying, and this little guy is part of the reason why.
He is the crux of the situation. I think he's better than the Manipulus. I think he's the best character that AdMech has access to.
Yeah, you see multiple lists.
You're
He's
often
55 points.
He's money. He's money in the bank. Okay.
Why 6? This should go in the YGWY tier, but for the different reason.
In addition, you can get Eyes of the Omnissiah to reroll advances. That's very powerful on some of these units. And that's you spend 1 CP pregame for an ability that lasts 5 turns and then lasts 9 rounds in a big tournament. That's just value. The warlord traits are so good for the Marshals. If the Mechanicus ones were better and competed, then I'd put these characters a little higher, but the Skitarii warlord traits are just so value.
Yeah. You don't need the Dominus. The Dominus really is kicked out by that guy. Because you're already taking him, and then there's a reroll ones to hit aura that you can just put on that, and there's literally no reason to take the Dominus.
Yep.
So that's unfortunate. I mean, he's the guy that, the Dominus was told not to worry about.
He's worrying.
He's worrying.
He's worrying big time. So typically you see 2 of these, 1 Manipulus. That's the standard character loadout, in my opinion.
Yeah, super good. It's not even expensive. How many points is that character loadout?
So they're both 110 for the 2 Marshals, and then if you add Lagi onto this Manipulus, because he went up and Lagi went up, he's 110. So 220.
That's still insanely cheap for the level of buffs.
Value.
No other army can lay down the literally 20 buffs, by the way. I made cards for you.
Yeah, you did.
And
I appreciated them.
Yeah, you need them. I know. So I made cards for all the buffs that Siegs would use in an event, and he would put them down next to his army when he uses them, just to help him remember. And he sends me a list. I'm like, just send me everything that you reasonably would expect to have in a list and expect to use. And he sends me a list, and I believe it was 21 buffs long.
And that was just one particular list.
Yeah, it's insanity. I was like, Siegs, do you need all these? He's like, well, yeah, for the list I'm running, in a week, yes.
Because with Mars, you have the full slate of Canicals, you've got your army-wide Doctrinas, then you have the Canic Thrallnet in the Veteran Cohort, which we'll get to later, that lays out another set of Doctrinas that you can put units into. It's just all good.
It's the buffs you can lay out in AdMech are the reason why AdMech are good.
Yeah, it's also the reason why they're complex. This army is complex.
Sure. I mean, if you can memorize 20 digits of pi, I guess you can memorize the 20 things you need to put down. It's not complex, but whatever. It's fine. Let's get to Cawl.
Okay, let's just talk about Cawl.
Let's talk about Cawl.
Okay, he's 180 points. He is an aura of reroll 1s to hit. Okay, so he has that. And he's a chapter master, so he gives full rerolls to hit to 1 of your core units. Seems pretty good, right? 180 points is pricey. They nerfed him from infantry to a monster now, so he can't go through breachable.
That's because his booty is big.
He's thick.
It's hard to fit around terrain with him.
In addition, his Warlord trait is 4-up invul, -1 damage. It's fine. He's relatively durable. But this guy can't access the Holy Order traits because he's a named character, which is really unfortunate because they're the reason you're taking Cult Mechanicus traits.
So you'd have to take another HQ in addition just to get access to those traits? Yeah.
Exactly. And on top of that, everything that he does is performed better by this guy over here.
Yeah.
For 55 points.
You don't need full reroll hits when everything in AdMech just hits on 2s.
You can get the important units hitting on 2s. So he's terrible. He needs to drop at least 30 points to even be remotely considered. He's just bad.
The killer really is that you have to take another Cult Mechanicus HQ in addition to him. And the points just... Like, remember how we were saying that the standard loadout's 220? Well, if you include Cawl, it's 400 because you still need all the buffs that you would take those other characters for.
That's not it. 2 other things about him. First of all is the fact that because AdMech got points increases, Cawl used to be a potential to the last target, but because the units went up, it'll be your like 10 Ruststalkers and stuff instead of Cawl, so he doesn't even fill that role, which was something you wouldn't do it anyway, but it was something to consider.
Because he's tough.
He's tough. He's just going to sit there buffing.
He sits there. He's a perfect to the last. He's in the center of your army. He doesn't do anything immediately threatening, so your opponent isn't trying to dig him out. Yeah. And he's more durable than...
He's pretty durable.
He's pretty tanky, so he'd be an amazing to the last.
But he can't even be that anymore.
But, yeah, about that. So...
And there's another ability on his data sheet, and it's pretty decent. So for your Mars units, they get access to the Doctrinas because they're Skitarii, and then on top of that, they get access to Canicles. Well, he has an ability that picks a unit, and it goes into a Canicle, kind of like the Canic Thrallnet. The problem there is it's only core Cult Mechanicus, which means trash. Well, we're going to find out.
I mean, we'll see, but there's going to be a lot of blues and purples in there, and gray.
But it does, for whatever reason, they didn't put if they put core Mars, that ability, that's actually pretty darn decent. Put a unit into say one of those Ranger bricks, turn after turn, you're in -1 to hit. In combat. That could have been good.
I'm not sorry that you don't get even more insane buffs.
But it could have made Cawl worthwhile. Okay?
Sure.
He just doesn't.
What they needed to do with him was make him a viable replacement for a Cult HQ, and not so. If you wanted to upgrade a Cult HQ, you pay like 60 more points and take Cawl instead. Yeah. But you have to take Cawl in addition. So his buffs either need to be insane, or
I believe in the lore he's part of Magi, but they should have just given him the ability as part of Lord of Mars to pick one of the Holy Orders and benefit from it that game.
Yeah, if they did that, then you could go, I have 60 points left over. I've already bought 5-man Ranger bricks. I don't really need any more bricks. 5-man Ranger units. I don't really need any more. You know what? I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to spend a little me time. I'm going to take Belisarius.
And I love Cawl. He's the Lord of Mars. I love the guy.
I used to play Cawl. Does his gun and weapon do anything?
Yeah, they're better than before. He hits decently hard in combat still. The problem is he's a lot of points, and these guys are much better.
I used to run back in like early 8th or whatever. I used to run Cawl and a bunch of little cheap Ranger units running around with cover, and they were just slightly more durable than you really wanted to deal with, and it was great.
Guess what, Jack? Vanguard.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
I was scared for a second.
18-inch range. They can get +6-inch range. Go to 24. They're normally strength 3, 6s to wound against non-vehicles, auto wounds. You can buff up their strength in Metallica to strength 4. You can give them AP1 from the Manipulus. In addition, like Jack said, they can benefit from a lot of different things. Their strat has been nerfed. It used to be very powerful. Now it's 2 CP for a big unit and 5s and 6s auto wounds against non-vehicles.
Right.
All right. So it's decent. But it's a little pricey, and it doesn't really compare to the other troop unit strat, which is much better in my opinion.
Yes.
So you typically never see that strat used.
I don't think that strat was more of a feels bad for certain matchups. It used to auto wound on 4s to hit. Now they just auto wound on 6s to hit general, which they had before. And now instead of the strat being auto wounding on 4s, they auto wound on 5s. Totally fine. Perfectly reasonable. The auto wounding on 4s wouldn't table most armies. Like, it wouldn't be that bad, but occasionally you'd see Be'lakor, and then you wouldn't see Be'lakor really, really fast.
The other thing is
some armies would just get really hosed by it.
Yeah, it pushed certain Horde army, because we were already seeing a shift towards more elite armies and Dreadnought heavy builds at that time, and you're not going to run a Horde army when these scary Vanguard
That's
around.
true. So, the 171 racks would get tabled in record time.
Because it's 3 shots apiece.
And a brick is 60 shots. So there's like, all right, here's 30 auto wounds, and now let me roll my wounds.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just...
God forbid you're in Metallica with the Strength 4 and the reroll wounds, or a -1 toughness aura. And they do inbuilt, if you're engagement range of them, they have -1 strength and toughness. It's a great ability to have. It comes up very often. Yeah. A lot of those things that come in hitting on Strength 4 or Strength 6. With -1 strength, now they're with Strength 6, they go to Strength 5, wounding on 3s. Strength 4 goes to Strength 3, wounding on 4s. Yep. It's a great ability to have. And -1 toughness against non-vehicles, super useful.
It seems like them and the Rangers fill different roles.
Yep.
The Rangers, we'll get to them, but they fill the role of the brick that is very hard to shift and shoots you from downtown. And just like gloms objectives, and it's just super annoying. But the Rangers, what was I talking about? The Vanguard. We'll get to Rangers in a second. You'll see my breathing just be like, but the Vanguard are great as little 5-man squads.
Yep, especially in the veteran cohort, because their ability there is they ignore blast, so they could actually work as a big squad there. You've seen that in my Metallica builds, but they also get to roll an additional d6 when they advance. And that means they're much faster getting onto objectives.
Yeah.
Which I really like.
They're also great in conjunction with melee units, because a little 5-man squad charges in, and your melee unit charges in. You're like, you're -1 toughness, and then my melee unit's going to clean you up.
In Metallica, you can spend a strat to make that, instead of just engagement range, a 6-inch bubble of -1 strength and toughness.
That's strength and toughness?
Yeah, that's what their ability is. Their data sheet. It's -1 strength and toughness. It's just good to have.
I just thought it was -1 toughness.
No, it's -1 strength and toughness.
Yikes.
It's good.
Yeah, they're real good.
Whether you're running one big brick, you probably would never run more than one, honestly. There's a custom Forge World that helps buff them further. You really rarely see it because Mars and Metallica are significantly better, but I still think you're always seeing Vanguard. Whether they're the 5-mans or a brick, you're seeing Vanguard in every list.
I think I personally would have them at orange. The role they're good at can be replaced, I think, by just a 5-man ranger unit. But that's their best role. It's a 5-man unit that also... Do they pregame move?
They do not pregame.
They don't. So that's another thing that Rangers are amazing at.
Yep.
But they're a cheap little 5-man unit that advances
now.
Very quickly, takes objectives, move blocks, gives you -1 toughness in addition. But I don't think they're essential, because, Jen, you can take Rangers as well. I think they're fine. They're definitely... It feels weird to put Rangers and them in the same tier. Spoiler alert, Rangers are going in tournaments.
I think they are, personally, from my experience playing them. I think they are absolutely necessary to the melee-oriented AdMech style that I think wins.
All right. Well, you know AdMech better.
I'll leave them here, and we'll come back, because at the end we'll look at this through the lens of the veteran cohort.
Oh, yeah, veteran cohort, get them up.
So here we go. Rangers. You know them, you love them. It's a heavy weapon, 30-inch range, strength 4, AP1, 1 damage.
Sorry, what you meant was 36-inch range, and it's heavy 3 and AP2 and ignores cover. I think that's what you meant to say.
So they have a wide range of buffs that you can put on Rangers. They have access to the Manipulous buffs. Amazing there. The Holy Orders, you can get 6s to hit with shooting or additional hits. You could potentially be benefiting from the Metallica reroll wounds with the Metallic and Lung. All that's amazing. They benefit from all those Skitarii Warlord traits, which are very great. Ignore AP1 and 2 from Logi. The Omnispecs that you're going to spend 10 points for now. Ignoring light cover. Great to have.
Super good. Functionally, an additional point of AP.
In Metallica, you ignore the heavy penalty when you move and shoot with them, just from their Forge World trait. But if you're in another one like Mars, you'll run the Raymond and the Technomartyr Relic to ignore all hit and ballistic skill modifiers, so they'll still just hit on 3s, no problem, potentially 2s. I
love how GW nerfed them by making their strat turn them into heavy 3 instead of rapid fire 2. I don't understand it, because what happened was they were like, all right, well, it's still heavy, so you're still taking the movement penalty. But AdMech have literally 50 ways to ignore any modifiers, not even just the heavy penalty, but you can do that too. they were like, yeah, all right, so we're going to nerf it so that you're now taking the heavy penalty, and when you're in close range, you don't get 4 shots, you only get 3. And you're like, oh, at max range, I get 3, and I ignore the penalty? And GW's like, yes. And then, anyway, I started blasting.
Yeah, so he's referring to the 2 CP Galvanic Fire Strat. It increases their galvanic rifles from heavy 2 to heavy 3. It's 2 CP, same as before. It just, instead of turning you into a rapid fire weapon, which you could have got max 4 shots in 18-inch range, or a little higher if you're in Lucius, now it's just, I'm 36 inches away, 3 shots each.
And look at that, you're dead.
It's very powerful, so you can get as many shots as a Vanguard unit with this stratagem. They benefit from all those buffs. This is just an amazing
straight
unit.
up
It's one of the best units in the game. Still, it's OBSEC. It's hard to deal with because the defensive buffs. Its offensive efficiency is insane because of it. Now, they recently did get a stealth nerf in the latest round of FAQs. Their power level went up. So what I had been doing in the veteran cohort was a 19-man unit was 9 power level, which meant that with the veteran cohort strat for 5 Fiona Pain, if you were at 9 power level, it was only 2 CP, and then in the turn of +1 save army-wide, you could make it only 1 CP with that calculate without diversion warlord trait. So I was doing some shenanigans there. Games Workshop must have heard me talk about it because they went ahead and increased the power level of ranger units, so I couldn't do that. So now you're just going to run the 20-mans instead of the 19s and just be happy with that.
Yeah, I was playing
amazing.
against AdMech, and the guy had a 20-man ranger brick, and I was like, yeah, what is more expensive because of that? I know Siegs takes a 19-man for reasons. I don't know what the reasons are. I know something's cheaper at 19 than 20, and they were like, I don't know. I think it's the same. And I was like,
all right, you
but
ready?
a lot of people just didn't realize that 19-man, 20-man would take it to that power level threshold. But all right, they fixed it, thank God, because it was so weird that one dude made the strat significantly cheaper. So
that guy was amazing. He was a hero for giving up his spot in the
he
unit.
He stayed home. He sat on the couch. He ordered pizza, and he gave his friends Feel No Pain for 1 extra CP.
All right, Rangers are just amazing. I think that's universal. They're one of the best units in the book, probably the best unit because of the buffs they can
One of
receive.
the best units in the game, too.
Yep.
Quick story about Rangers. Very quick. We were doing a list. We were doing a video about how to evaluate units, right? We didn't even mention they have a 3-inch pregame move, by the way,
which is just great.
which is amazing.
Yep.
But we were doing a video about how you should evaluate units, and Siegs did the script for that one. And there's various different ways a unit can be good. Whether they're a durable objective holder, they're cheap throwaway units, they're a ranged threat, etc. And there were like 6 different categories, and then Siegs put in examples for each. So ranged threat might be, Skitarii Rangers, for example, and, broadsides. And then the next unit, good durable OBSEC. Well, that's Rangers again, obviously. And so what he didn't, I don't know if you realized it.
No, I did.
You did.
I was
Every
trying to...
single category had Skitarii Rangers as one of the examples.
I was seeing if I could just get you activated.
John was the one who noticed it first. But yeah, they're great in every single role you could possibly think of taking them, short of being a dominant melee threat. I don't really know what else you have to say.
You ready for? We have a lot.
Let's take a break from the good stuff, please.
All right, here we go for the other troops. Yes, AdMech in fact have other troops, Jack. I don't know if you know this. There are other troop units, and they don't have core, and for some reason they're bikers. So
oof, they better be good to make up for that. I'm sure they are.
No, they're overcosted. So here we go. We're starting with destroyers. They hit on 4s. They don't get access to doctrinas, which is where your way of getting pluses to hit in shooting or combat. Don't have any of that.
Well, you don't need it, obviously, because their gun is just going to rip you apart.
It's just, they're okay. There's 1 shot on the torsion cannon. Sorry, that's breachers. This is destroyers, so they have the plasma. Just decent, but overcharging it. Guess what? You're not core, so you don't have rerolls.
And you're going to kill yourself.
You're going to take... I believe did they change it to mortals on 1s?
I have no idea.
I even forget because I haven't used them in so long.
It would be funny, though.
But they don't have the same defensive buff, because once again, core, I mentioned it. All the buffs up here, they're either restricted to Skitarii core or just core in general. They're not core. These are not core. They don't benefit from any good rule in this book. They're terrible. Why?
I'm sorry that only half of your troops are among the best units in the game.
There's a Cult Mechanicus.
I'm sorry about that. That must be rough.
There's a Cult Mechanicus defense cohort, so the Army of Renown for Cult Mechanicus units. and they can get access to double OBSEC there, and if they're on an objective or in your deployment zone, they can get -1 damage.
Does that mean you're not taking Skitarii Rangers?
That means you're not taking any of the good units that are in this book.
That just ain't it, Chief.
And not only are the most efficient units you can't take, but also all the speed elements. So your army's just slow. And I've seen people run it. The rules themselves, there's the OBSEC Warlord trait is by far the best part of it. The strats are pretty darn mediocre. And the rules themselves are highly restrictive. It's not just you get -1 damage wherever you are. It's you have to be on an objective, wholly within range of an objective, or in your deployment zone. That's just not it.
That is very situational. I mean, it's going to be like half the time, but it's not something you can count on.
Exactly.
And your opponent can just jump on you whenever you're not.
Because they're not fast. They
They're
can't
not.
they can't just jump from your deployment zone to a midfield objective. And they're certainly not advancing and shooting.
And if you leave your deployment zone with bikers, so
Yes.
they're not hiding behind walls and jumping through them. If you leave your deployment zone and try to start rushing towards an objective with these guys, they will get killed.
The Technoarchaeologist lets them shoot and do actions. So there's that.
Well, that's good, because if you're taking the defense cohort, you are not taking Rangers or Vanguard, and so you might actually need that. But luckily, you're not taking the defense cohort.
Where are you feeling, Jack? Are they overcosted? They're certainly overcosted.
One of them has to be YGWY, and I just need you to tell me which one's worse.
This one is worse.
Okay.
The Destroyers. They're much worse. You see them very rarely because guess what? You shoot, but they have no defense. They're just instantly dead as soon as you commit them. Breachers at least have a 2-up armor save, and Agrippina, you can give them T6, so they can be reasonably defensive. And then the Agrippina Warlord trait benefits them, or is it the Relic, is you pick a vehicle within 18 inches, you get reroll wounds against it. That's not terrible, but they're still overcosted and terrible.
Yeah.
Even with all that.
You just named a bunch of buffs, but remember the 20 thick stack of buffs we mentioned before? Nah, they don't get any of that. So they're less than good.
They need serious help. They need to go down minimum 5 points, and they need to gain the core keyword. Those two things would fix them, and they still probably wouldn't be better than the stuff up here, because the Skitarii Veteran Cohort is just so much better. But they would at least be situational but good, maybe even strong in some lists. But they need serious. They need.
I'm really looking
points
forward
decreases.
to when they pull a Drukhari on us and they go, all right, so the best units in AdMech are going to go down 5 points apiece. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to add core to Breachers and drop them 10. There we go. Game solved. We fixed AdMech, boys. And then 18 Breachers or however many you can stick in a list is suddenly going to be the new hotness.
I think the only future that would have happened is if I didn't win LVO with AdMech. Now AdMech is still on the radar.
Good. All right. So here's the thing. By the way, AdMech went up a ton of points. A ton.
240 like on average.
Right.
For most lists.
Good. First off, good. Second off, it's still one of, if not the best army in the game. Still, you are going to disagree with that. I can see it on your face right now. You're like, oh my god, they're awful. Like they went up.
No,
in
they're not
points.
awful. They are still A tier. I think they're still very close to the top of A tier.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of other armies are falling off that would give them problems. I think you could really make an argument that they're still the best army in the game.
I don't think they're better than Custodes or better than Drukhari still. Simply because those armies are just much easier to pilot.
Well, we can save that for a general army tier list.
Yep.
But needless to say, I don't think you need to worry about your...
I think if you take me with AdMech, then it is absolutely still one of the best lists you could run. But you saw it. The next highest placed AdMech at LVO was 67th.
He does this to trigger me. He does this to make me mad.
They had a 44% win rate.
See, look at that smile. Is that the smile of someone who would say something just to make me mad?
But
yes.
AdMech is still good. I'm not disagreeing there. I just don't think they're absolute top tier unless you play them perfectly, and then they are still top tier. How about that, Jack?
Matto says
baby.
that you've activated me.
All right, $5 super chat from Mr. Matt. Oh, thanks so much, Matto. See the defense cohort with the Cataphrons from time to time. Are they any good there? They are certainly better in the defense cohort.
They better be in that list, because what else are you doing with your
time? The problem with the defense cohort is you can't take any Skitarii units, and the Skitarii units are just the best.
Yeah.
And they are your speed and mobility, and Jack knows this. Mobility helps you win games. Having a slow list that just
speed wins games.
That just trundles up the board, but doesn't do consistent damage, and defense isn't amazing. What are you doing?
Yeah. It's also the case that faster armies give you more plays, whereas slower armies you'd have to tend to rely on your durability, which can just mean, if your opponent can crack that durability, you are just gone. Like, you're just done. There's nothing you can do about it.
There's no recovery.
There's no recovery. And it gives your opponent a lot of ways to outplay you by move blocking, by being on objectives all over the board. As your skill goes up, you're better able to use your mobility, whereas slow durable armies they fall off as player skill rises.
Yeah, you have to give Jack a little bit of a break here because he had at least 6 months of just playing against AdMech, where he was not having.
Here's to 6 months more, you know.
He was not having a good time.
No, there's a very good reason that it's Siegs and me on this right now, and it's because Siegs plays AdMech. And because I get triggered by AdMech.
And you have a lot of experience playing against them.
I do. I will say I have not lost to AdMech that wasn't piloted by you.
Yep.
I believe. I could be wrong. So, I don't know, do with that information what you will. I'm sure you're going to bring that up.
The skill matters in this army. You have to admit that.
It does. It does. Is it 5D chess, like you say to me, to make me
60.
mad?
At least 60, Jake.
Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, moving on.
Let's go. We've got Fulgurites, we have the Electro-Priests up next, the Corpuscarii. These guys have 3 shots. They're basically very similar volume of fire to Infiltrators, and kind of similar to Vanguard. They're Strength 5, AP 1 damage, but they have Tesla, so 6s are 2 additional hits. They have that same profile in melee. It's a decent unit. They hit on 3s, and they ignore all hit modifiers. And I believe they are 14 points per model, which
that's pretty reasonable. Do they still have 5 of Feel No Pain?
They still have.
I haven't seen them on the table.
They still have an Invuln and the 5 of Feel No Pain. I think they are the best of the Cult Mechanicus units.
Yeah, they sound pretty good.
Obviously excluding.
Yeah, the characters, and I love that you have access to a fight slash strat on Mechanicus, and you're like, you know what? I'll always going to include at least one Mechanicus movie.
So these guys can do that fight last strat because they are core Cult Mechanicus, and in addition to it, they have a strat where if there's a target within 12 inches in the shooting phase, they can just do D3 mortals to it. It's a useful ability to have.
It's not bad when you need it. Yeah.
So not the end of the world there. I think they are, because they're relatively cheap and they put out good volume of fire. Their problem is they can't get the bonuses of the Doctrinas, which is part of what the army, AdMech as an army, revolves around.
Yeah.
And the Cannicles just aren't as strong as Doctrinas.
You're going to hear that a lot for any unit that doesn't receive the benefit of the Doctrinas and the Cannicles and whatnot, is they are a lot worse because, and then you list like 40 buffs and they can't get any of these.
But they also can go into reserve, and you can run them in a big 20-man brick if you wanted to. I don't recommend. But
I wouldn't see why, but you could.
I think they're situational but good.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
They're actually a reasonable profile. I think they could probably do with going down a point, or the Cannicles just get better, or something happens for Cult Mechanicus. But they're actually pretty decent.
How about the stick boys?
Fulgurites, they're slightly more expensive. Their combat is decent. They gained they're consistent 2 damage now. They still do mortals on 6s. They have access to that fight last strat, which is very useful to have. The problem there is they are so dramatically outshone by the melee units that I'm about to show that they are just rarely ever seen and overcosted.
Melee units like Mr. Handy himself, the servitor?
Not him. We're going to see them in just a second, but I think they're decidedly worse than Skitarii. Corpuscarii, because they don't have guns. Corpuscarii actually do shooting and combat. They only do combat. And there are units that do combat a lot better than they do.
Ruststalkers.
Their strat is 6s to hit auto wounds. You can just get that for Skitarii units on Janitors. If I want that, so
the servitor is raising his hand. He needs to ask a question, and that question is, where does he belong on the tier list?
He is not overcosted and rarely seen, and he's not YGWY because they're just reasonably cheap servitors. They're situational. They're not necessarily good. The reason you don't see them is because 5-man troop units are not that much more expensive and are just significantly better.
Yeah, how many points are they?
It's
30?
32, I believe.
32 for
4 models.
I think that gets pushed down to overcosted. They are straight up worse than a 5-man Ranger unit or 5-man Vanguard unit. And the 5-man Vanguard unit is OBSEC, has some shooting, has a debuff. It's just so much better for like 10 extra points.
It's because Skitarii went up. They went up a point each, so it's 45 points non-veteran versus 32.
Yeah, and I just don't see a reason why you would take 4 instead of 5 models and not OBSEC.
In addition,
and no gun.
They are hurt by the new missions. A lot of the actions or sticky objectives want you to be OBSEC. They're not OBSEC. And on top of that, they are a 4-man, so retrieve Nachman data is not automatic for this cheap unit.
Whereas a 5-man Vanguard unit, it is automatic because they are both troops and a 5-man.
Yep. So I don't think we're going to be seeing these very often. But in the Cult Mechanics of Defense or in Cohort, you will.
I mean, you gotta, because you can't take any of the good units, so...
All right, Jack, we're getting back to Skitarii units, okay?
Is this Slap Chop, or is this...
This is the Infiltrators.
Okay, no, we'll get to the
they have
Slap
the forward
Chop
deploy.
later.
If you're within 12 inches and declare attacks against them, can't reroll anything.
Which is really annoying.
It's just a great ability to have, because in Metallica, you have a 1 CP strat to turn off rerolls, so they come into the Infiltrators, you already have it there, then they go into your Ruststalkers, you turn off the rerolls there as well. Just a great tech.
Really frustrating, especially since they can have a 5-up invuln in the veteran cohort, and you can give them a 5-up feel no pain, and all of a sudden a 10-man unit just does not die.
Yep. They are very good because the forward deploy helps on some of these new missions where you need to control a midfield objective at the start of your command phase in order to gain the CP. So useful to have them there. They're a great screening tool. In addition, their weapons are pretty good. So typically you see the Taser Goad, which 6 is to hit or 2 additional. It's the Tesla.
Really good.
Strength 6, AP 1.
AP 1, 1 damage.
Yep, 1 damage. If you're in Ryza, you can make it AP 2 potentially. You could spend 1 CP to give them +1 strength, bring them up to strength 7. That's nice in Metallica. Reroll wounds nearby. That's great. Or +1 to wound with Ryza. Yeah, it's good to have. In Mars, you can get the Canonical +1 strength and then use the strat to get an additional +1 strength. So they're even better there.
They're not particularly great at any one thing. They're just an amazing all-rounder, and they're not expensive at all.
The reason that I love them is they have a 1 CP strat. If they're within 9 inches of a board edge, they go back into reserve. And they can come in 9 inches away on any board edge the next turn. Yep. And this means with a 6-man now, instead of a 5-man, you can auto-do Retrieve Enactment in your opponent's half of the board as you kill their screening elements. Yeah, I think you're always going to see at least one of these units. I think they're very good. I would say strong in most lists.
Yeah, we'll get to... we're redlining right now on the
You ready for this unit?
Oh my god.
This is the Ruststalkers, Jack.
So, I had a formula for my Black Templars when we were going into the team tournament. The formula was this. 1 Ruststalker unit, put me in coach. 2 Ruststalker units, maybe we look at other matchups. 3 Ruststalker units, do not put me in coach. Ruststalkers are such a problem. They are so fast and they hit so hard, but please take it away, Seeks.
Okay, you ready for this? Their defensive profile isn't impressive. All right.
What do you mean it's not impressive?
4-up armor, 5-up invuln, 2 wounds. Nothing great. But it comes from the same defensive bonuses you could stack onto these guys. So you could put Ignore AP 1 and 2, +1 save from the Canic Thrallnet or the Army Wide. You can put Firepoint Telemetry Cache on. But guess what? On their data sheet, if they're in terrain, guess what? They get an additional +1. So if they're benefiting from light cover, they get an additional +1. So it can be just sitting on a 2-up without any other abilities.
And then you could slap Ignores AP 1 and 2 on there, and you can slap 5-up Feel No Pain on 2 wound models, and...
Don't worry, they've got offense too. So let's talk about this. On their data sheet, Optimized Gate. That means they ignore all penalties to their movement.
Can't Tanglefoot them.
Their advances.
They run through forests.
Or their charge rolls.
Yep.
You can't modify it. They're just going. They're automatic.
And then you can make them advance 8.
So
is it advance 8 or is it advance 6? I might be
8 is the max you could get. Right. And that is with Magi and rolling a 6. If you run Eyes of the Omnissiah for that reroll, you could...
Can you auto do it? Auto advance 6?
You could auto advance 6.
So you can 1 CP auto advance them 8. How fast do they move?
No, not 8. The +2.
Oh, it has to be a roll.
Is a roll.
Got it.
So either roll or you do that. But guess what? +3-inch move. They normally move 8. You can make them move 3. Or 3 more for 11 total. In Metallica, 1 CP flat advance them 6. Or you could use the Eyes of the Omnissiah Magi +2 to their advances to try and get a consistent roll. So on average, they're moving, like 15, 17, up to 17 inches, up to 19 max.
Declaring a charge.
And then declaring a charge. Yeah, against Evan Tomchin, I rolled 2 6s in a row on the unit, so they just moved 19 right into the middle of the table. I was like, okay, cool.
Ruststalkers.
Awesome.
Anytime people don't take Ruststalkers, I have such an easier
That's
game.
not it, Jack, okay? Because let's talk about their damage.
Because they hit so hard.
Strength 5, you're running Transonic Blades. AP 3, 1 damage.
They're only Strength 5, I thought they're Strength 6.
1 CP brings them to strength 6, or the canonical brings them to strength 6.
The buffs, I forgot. The buffs.
So they can get to strength 7 in Mars, which is very useful. But get ready for this. Okay, 6s to wound are mortals. It's not capped, so if you're rolling a lot of attacks and a lot of wound rolls...
And you also roll hot, as this man likes to do.
I mean, sometimes, occasionally, when it's important. You get a lot of mortals in addition to normal damage. That's just great. Well, how many attacks do they have? All right, 3 base, 4 on the Sergeant, plus 1 for the Cord Claw. And then you can spend a Codex Strat, 1 CP, plus 1 attack. And if they're in the Veteran cohort and they made a charge move, another plus 1 attack. So they could come in swinging with a lot of attacks, Jack.
5 attacks, specifically. Hitting on 2s, re-rolling,
yeah, easy
high
to make
strength,
them hit on 2s.
mortals, good AP. It just kills you. You're just dead.
It's a total package. And guess what? You can throw relics on the Sergeant, the Princeps. So one of the Sergeants can have the Tempercopia for Fight Last. Just charge in there, Fight Last. Even if your opponent has Fight Last, you're the turn player making the charge. You'll activate first.
You also always leave that Sergeant right in front. So if you want to make a charge, it's like, yeah, you can charge the Ruststalkers, but you're fighting last, boy. Oh.
And it's 3 inches. It's not engagement range. It's pick a unit within 3 inches. And they don't even have to engage you. So you can set it up where if they want to get into your Rangers, you could potentially be doing a Fight Last, and then Veteran Rangers have 2 attacks each. It's a whole thing.
You can also base them to prevent them from doing movement shenanigans, which is pretty nice. At least War Room shenanigans I've heard about.
All amazing. In addition, there's another relic that's very good on them. That is a 6-inch aura of 6 to hit in combat or additional hits. Other buffs that you could put on there are Janitors. I did this in my Metallica list. Pick a unit, 6 to hit in melee auto wound. So very good against tougher targets, especially if you're not going to be nearby your characters.
Other good buffs, or debuffs, would be you put Vanguard into the target, so they're -1 toughness. That's pretty easy. You can you put the Metallican Lung next to them and utterly obliterate any unit that you want.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Reroll wounds on these bad boys when they're already hitting on 2s. Rerolling is just... Bye. See ya. 50 attacks. Okay. Boom.
They went up from 17 to 19 points. They are still one of the best units in the game, in my opinion. They are the best unit in the AdMech book.
They need to go up again by a significant amount.
You go down by at least 2. Go back to 17. You know, maybe they can compete with some of the new Eldar stuff, right, Jack?
They're gonna be feeling the new Eldar when I get my hands on them.
They are utterly amazing, particularly in the Veteran cohort. But I feel like you're still running at least 1 unit with Tempercopia in your others as counter assault.
Yeah.
But you should be running at least 1 of these units.
Yeah.
They are that good.
They're also amazing counterpunch when your opponent tries, because you're a shooting army generally. Although you can run melee builds, you can run mixed builds. But the way most people run them is a shooting army, and you do need to close the distance on a shooting army. Well, that's when, friggin' 25 of these guys just has words with you and tables you. So they are incredible. They're quite good.
If your opponent charges you and you put Fight Last on them, their Fight First cancels out your Fight Last. Then you both swing as if neither ability was active. So you swing as if it's an existing combat, meaning the other player activates first. So I charged into Jack here, into his Ruststalkers, and I'm like, haha, got you here, Jack. Oops, the Tempercopia. We're gonna fight as if neither had those abilities, and it's an existing combat then. Jack activates first. Ruststalkers pick up all the stuff, get to consolidate even closer to you, then next turn advance and charge up the field.
You basically need to put your own Fights Last on them before you get to charge.
Exactly.
Unless you can avoid the Sergeant, which
is possible, but you can. It's up to you how well you position. Ruststalkers are awesome. Love you, Ruststalkers. So we've got a unit that Jack probably doesn't know what it does. It's called Skystalker.
At first I thought those were Pteraxii.
This is Pteraxii.
Yeah, and then I was like, wait, that's not Pteraxii, that's Pteraxii.
They're both Pteraxii. This is a Skystalker, this is a Sterilizer. The Skystalker has a bunch of shots with no AP strength 3, 1 damage. It can't be buffed by the Manipulus.
So that's a Sterilizer that you bought on Wish.
This is just a bad gun.
Yeah.
In addition, it lost its ability to fly over units and do mortals. Now it has Arc Grenades access, which is a strat that you have to spend a CP on, and you can do mortals against a vehicle if it's really close to you. It's terrible. I've never seen it used. So, because the Cold Mechanicus characters have a strat to do mortals to a vehicle unit, data spike. So you're going to see that before you ever see this.
And you also just don't see that.
They're 10 points cheaper than Sterilizers, but do no amount of damage. They can fall back and shoot on their data sheet.
Woo.
But they have no combat that's really worth mentioning.
Do they have the combat that the Sterilizers have with the claws?
It's similar, yeah. They have claws.
Yeah. So how many points are they a piece?
They're 17.
That's too much.
Yeah, they're 85 points for 5.
That's way too much.
So they're pricey, and they're also just giant wings, and it's very easy, very, very hard to hide them. But for just a little bit more, so where am I going to put them? Overcosted. You rarely ever see them because this unit far outshines them, just like a lot of stuff in the AdMech that you see. There's like options that are just so much better than the other ones that it doesn't make any sense that they exist. Yeah. So Sterylizors, why are they good? Well, they get to fall back and charge, which is a much more useful ability in my opinion. They have flamers that auto hit, so you don't have to worry about their ballistic skill or buffs. They're natively AP1 there, and strength 4 instead of strength 3. Still 1 damage, but they also have access to that very important fallback and charge. You could put the Warlord trait on there, that program retreat for fallback and shoot, and I would only ever consider doing that if I'm running the big 10-man squad, and if I ran Artisans as a Holy Order trait, so I had a different option of fallback and shoot in my army. My Rangers.
They're basically like whatever the other one was that I'm never going to remember the name.
Skystalkers.
Sure. They're basically like that, but with a gun.
Now, where are you going to see them? You could see them in the big unit. Booster thrust got nerfed. So 1 CP, at the end of the turn, you can bring them into reserve unless they came in from reserve, or some events rule that if they came out of a transport, they can't do it as well. But they're still very good in the veteran cohort because of the speed with advance and charge, the amount of damage they do in shooting, because guess what? It's an assault weapon.
Yep.
And in combat.
And it auto hits, so you don't care about the penalty.
In combat, when they charge or were charged, they get an additional +1 attack.
It's pretty. They're just a solid unit.
Yep.
They're mobile, so they get to actually apply their damage better. They get to go dig stuff out, and then they get to also go back into reserves. So many times, I think my board position is great because I'm going to go eat the Sterylizors, and they hit me, but it's fine. I'm going to kill them. I'm going to do a bunch of other stuff, and then suddenly the Sterilizers just whoop, we're in reserve now. And
they have a bunch of flamers. You don't really want to charge in there.
That's how it feels every time they go back into reserve. I'm just like, oh.
The other thing they don't have arc grenades. And that's great because arc grenades are terrible. Instead, they have a 1 CP strat to, on a 2-up, your opponent can't fall back.
Gross.
This means if you run them melee heavy oriented builds, you can trap things in combat and have them survive, and also just be annoying. They'll get to fight in your opponent's turn. It's just massively disruptive.
For a shooting army, AdMech sure has one of the best combat armies in the game.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. That's why I always say is my AdMech lists appear to be a shooting list, but they're actually, I spend most of my strats on the combat, and I make it a combat army. So that's part of the veteran cohort's power. I think the Sterilizors are at least strong in most lists. I think they're going to be staples because I think you need this against Tau specifically, but
they are
I'm going to put them strong in
they're
most
so
lists.
good. They are so good.
Because
they're also good because you hit your opponent, you go back into reserves, and then later in the game you just come back down and you rot.
Yep. You make them. I think you'll see the 6-mans now to make sure that you auto do retrieve Nachman data.
Yep.
But you could still
retrieve Nachman data, not rod. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think you're going to be seeing them in almost every AdMech list that can take them. So not the Colt Mechanicus defense cohort.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Next one. Next up.
We've got Sulfur Hounds next. Yes.
It's hard to tell.
A little hard to tell. Let me just make sure there's no other super chats. All right. A lot of discussion going on. Love to see it. I'm going to come back and read these comments later because I'm that type of guy. But Sulfur Hounds, Jack.
Sulfur Hounds.
I've played these in a couple games.
They're good.
I played them once against you. I played them against Nick's Pink Hearts where they just utterly obliterated
yes.
a unit of Bloodletters on Overwatch.
Sure.
What do? Okay, they each have 2 pistol shots, strength 4, AP 1 damage. Cool. And then they have a flamer that is on a pistol flamer that's on the mount itself. D6 shots, strength 4, AP 1 damage.
It's really good.
It's a good profile. Yeah. When you advance, you can shoot their pistol profiles. And you shoot it without penalty.
And they can shoot into combat, but they also get the benefits of having an assault weapon. That's awesome.
Exactly. Like it's really good. They made this unit actually work because if they didn't have that, it would just be terrible. They are this 1 point cheaper than Serberys Raiders with their points increase, so they're 19 points a model. Although the sergeant has to. This is something that's a little different with AdMech, is the sergeants typically have to run a random melee weapon that came with the kit. So you have to run the Arc Maul on the sergeant, which I always forget he has, and roll him instead as having the terrible non-AP combat. But he does have an Arc Maul, and the sergeant 30 points. So he's a little pricey.
Because the Arc Maul's 10?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It's not cheap. So it's baked into the cost.
So basically they are the same cost as...
they're more expensive. Nine Cerberus Raiders are 180 points, and then 9 Sulfur Hounds is 190.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So annoying there, but at the same time, their profile is very good. They also have the ability of the Vanguards, so because they're Vanguards on ponies, it's if they're engagement range, -1 strength and toughness.
Can they run away when you charge them?
They cannot.
Okay, because that is the thing that takes Cerberus Raiders just absolutely over the top.
They have no access to the tactical oblique strat. They don't have a galvanic weapon, so they can't use galvanic fire. And they can't be buffed by the Manipulus, like the Cerberus Raiders can.
Do they pregame move?
They don't also pregame move. They just move 12
Again,
inches.
the things that make Cerberus Raiders.
So
I'm eyeing that red spot for the Cerberus Raiders, but
they do more damage.
They do.
Especially in the veteran cohort, you can give them +1 to wound, and Wrath of Mars is 1 CP on them. So
sure.
they can put out a lot of damage. The problem is their mobility just isn't the same as Pteraxii or Cerberus Raiders. And so they always kind of be the first thing that I think about cutting if I even throw them in the list.
Yeah, they're definitely not bad. They're good. They're very good.
So I think they're situational but good. In veteran cohort, they go up, honestly, but probably just to the top of this list. I still don't take them that often.
Yeah.
They need a points decrease or some sort of buff.
Or not. Just as a different perspective. Maybe
I think when
not.
you compare them to other cavalry, they still need a little help.
Yeah, probably. So, they're still pretty good though.
I'm saying like 1 or 2 points.
They're still really good.
But in the context of AdMech, they're still much better than this stuff down here.
Yes. All right, now let's just the absolute most frustrating gentleman.
I was known for running 27 of these. Technically, I was running 26. But Jack played against this.
Yes.
It's just turn after turn of Cerberus Raiders. Why are they so good? Well, first of all, they get a pregame move. And the latest round of FAQs confirmed that if you do +3 inch move turn 1, they get it on their pregame normal move. So move 15 inches pregame if you want to. 12 is enough, obviously. Then you get your normal move. They could advance and still shoot. If they're in veteran cohort, they can advance and charge. They have a boatload of attacks. 2 base, 3 on the sergeant, and additional 2 with the mount. That's no AP.
They're also snipers.
They are snipers. So they do mortals on 6s in addition.
Yep. So you just have 27 of these hitting on 2s right on top of you turn 1, being like, yeah, all your characters are dead.
They're galvanic fire, so the Manipulus can give them the extra range and AP. In Metallica, they can ignore the advance penalty, can get flat 6 advance. They can be ignoring AP 1 and 2, +1 save. They can get fire point telemetry cache, though they only benefit from the cover there because they're not infantry.
Yeah. They're among the best move blockers in the game.
And they have Tactical Oblique. You set it up, surround an objective. You see me do it on streams many times. Your opponent can't get behind them, so they can't trap them. And I've left a gap so they can move their full 12 inches away. My opponent declares the charge inevitably. I'm like, cool, Tactical Oblique. I have Logi, so I'm going to reduce the strat cost once to 1 CP. And I'm going to make a normal move 12 inches away. How about that, Jack?
Don't love it.
You can't declare them again because I'm more than 12 from the declaring unit.
Don't love it. Now, it is very easy to misplay with that and just like leave them next to something else or leave 2 Cerberus Raider units near each other. That is a no-no because I'll just declare both. And then if one of them decides it wants, or I'll declare one. And if it decides it wants to leave, then I will redeclare to the other one.
Yep, the strat changed in 8th edition. You declared the unit and it went away.
Oops.
And then you were like, you couldn't redeclare charges. You just failed.
Well, that was back in 8th when you could declare as many charges as you want and you only had to make one of them.
So they changed the modern version of the strat so your opponent can redeclare targets if you use it.
Thankfully.
And they nerfed it so you can't use it in engagement range
It's
as well.
still Jesus. It's still absolutely broken. Because you just have this unit that moves up to the center of the board, takes objectives, and then if you want to do anything about it, they run away. They have good combat, they have good shooting, so they're fast. So you don't know what you're getting when you're playing against them. Your opponent goes first, they can literally be right on top of you, shooting you, move blocking you, one unit's in front of you, tagging all your shooting. Or they go second, you can't see them, they're moving, taking objectives, but you can't charge them, they're sniping you from range. It's so frustrating.
Jack knows I love doing this. My opponent picks Stranglehold. I'm going to make one of those objectives a nightmare to ever touch.
Yes. These guys went up, good. They need to go up
they
again.
They went up 4 points.
Awesome.
16 to 20. They're pretty pricey now.
Dope. They need to go up to 22, 23.
No.
Yes.
No. They are a tournament staple in my mind. Even though I didn't run them at LVO, I would really miss them the whole time. Just having Serberys Raiders would have made a lot of those games much easier, and not having them was very sad because Ironstriders, which we're going to get to, did not perform.
The fact they're 20 points a model and Ruststalkers are, 19 points a model?
Ruststalkers are 19.
It's insane. And that's after nerfs.
These guys are still, in my opinion, some of the best units. Even with their current points, you can run a 5-man. You can still run the big squad if you want to. Yes. But I wouldn't run multiple big squads. You're just going to run out of points. Everything
in that red area, everything in tournament staples, and I think that's probably the end of the tournament staples. No spoilers, but all of that needs to go up in points even more. I'm sorry, Siegs. It has to be said.
I think that's just Jack Salt because they have a 44% win rate. There's no way they're going points increases. Not happening.
I don't know how that's possible if they have a 44% win rate because they are still
That's with
insane.
Me. That's with me. And it's been like this for months. It's not different. You just have to accept reality. They've made an army that is so high skill cap and it's so easy to make mistakes with them that even though they have insane power at the top, most people cannot bring it up to that power level.
I'm mad, Siegs.
That's just the truth of it.
It doesn't matter.
That is the truth.
It only matters if when I'm playing against you, do you have insane units or not?
You can't balance the game around just me, even though they try to.
If there were... All right.
And me running Drukhari wasn't enough to get them to actually nerf Drukhari, so I've given up.
They nerfed it. They just did. Like only 3 months late, but whatever.
All right, this isn't about that though. Ready?
Isn't it?
We're gonna keep going. The Dragoon. I don't know if you've seen this unit before, Jack, but it's it's called.
Is that the last chicken? Is that the Ironstrider?
It is not the Ironstrider.
But it looks like an Ironstrider, and yet it is not.
It's a Dragoon.
Fascinating conundrum.
It is the melee version of the Ironstrider.
Melee version?
Same defensive profile. Typically, you take the Taser Go to mix it strength 8, and it's flat 2 damage now.
Okay.
Which is reasonable. It still has the Tesla ability, so 6s are additional hits. It seems fine, but guess what? It's a vehicle and it has a giant base, and it's so easy to move block that it can never hit anything important.
Assault units with a base that size, they cannot go through walls. I'm sorry. They're just not going to be that good.
You cannot.
They are so tall that you just can't hide them. Is that how it's posed with the Taser Goat sticking straight up?
You can make them stick.
Okay, thank God for that.
Down. But yeah.
But if you just can't hide them because they're vehicles and
large base size,
and the Taser either sticks straight out, in which case it's hard to hide them behind obscuring, or it sticks straight up and it's hard to hide them behind walls when you're in the obscuring terrain. And they're fast, but it takes you so long to get around every single piece of terrain on the board with your gigantic base.
No advance in charge. The terrain density in 9th edition is much higher. It's hard to get those angles. Even -1 to hit from the incense cloud isn't enough. On top of that, they're just not cheap either. They're like 70 points a model.
They fall super cleanly into YGWY.
They are one of the worst units in this book.
Yes.
And on top of that, Jack, they started with core, and when Ironstriders lost core, they also lost core for no reason.
Why?
Just to keep it consistent with that profile. So they were probably here, and taking core away was just like, nope, they're absolutely garbage. One of the worst units in this book.
Yeah, I can 100% get behind that.
You just don't see them, even though they look amazing.
I've never seen them on the board, first off, and that says something. And also, just hearing what they do, they are not good. They do not do things you want in games of 40k.
Definitely not without core. Like at core, you can start putting some buffs that make them somewhat interesting. Without it, then no.
Lol. Yeah.
They're no.
Yeah.
Melee unit that can't get into combat with what you want to get in combat
and
with.
Is not durable. And also, I don't think it hits that hard, right?
It hits okay. I mean, they actually hit pretty
How many points are they a piece?
I think they're 70.
That is not where it's
at. But they're darn pricey.
That is so overcosted. Oh my god.
Its shooting brethren is seen more often, particularly in Mars because you get a free reroll to hit there. They also lost core, like I mentioned,
but they don't really care that much.
You pretty much see the las cannons taken. They are strength 9, AP 3, flat 3 plus D3 damage, 2 shots each. It's just good to have with a free reroll to hit there from Mars. It's nice. In mechanical turn, you get a reroll to hit wounded damage roll. So they're very efficient for one turn. And outside of that, they're a little swingy, as I've seen in many of my games, where they do nothing outside of that turn.
Yep.
But they're 85 points now instead of 75. They went up 10 points, even after losing core.
I think they're in a good place right now, honestly. I don't think they're broken, but they're certainly not bad.
Their defense isn't great. Where you see them is specifically in Mars with solo. I like solo ones, because then you get the max out of the rerolls. I think they're situational but good. In a meta where there's a lot of anti-tank or like Crusher Stampede, there's a lot of durable units, you want them.
I think that's the meta we're in right now, though. I think I'd put them at strong in most lists, but I'm
going to finish that thought, and Jack, guess what? When I ran them, they still did nothing against the durable targets. I might as well have been playing 500 points down in most of my games because they were so awful. I had full line of sight to a bunch of tanks and was barely killing one. That was just the reality of
roll better, Sigs. I don't know what to tell you.
It was their invulns. They're making invulns. You can't do anything about that. Yeah. And then I was rolling 1s and 2s to wound. And with the Marshal there, when they had core, they were super efficient. Now they're just not outside of that canonical turn. I don't think they're that good.
Yeah. They're not particularly good in the Custodes matchup because the Custodes will shoot them first, and then they just die to Custodes shooting. It's actually horrendous with salvo launchers.
They don't do any damage either. They're just 4-up invulns, transhuman, no rerolls. It's just not good.
Custodes are faster, which means speed wins games, as we were saying before. And the fact that Custodes are faster means they will get the first shot into the Ironstriders, which means the Ironstriders will just die and never do anything. So they sound like they're good into Custodes, and they're just not.
So I think they're situational but good, because even in that situation, they're not that great.
Yeah,
they're the best tool that you have for long-range, dedicated anti-tank. But Rangers, Ruststalkers, much better. I've been
convinced.
Kastelan Robots.
Punchbots.
They went down. Punchbots are by far the best. They come in with 5 attacks at strength 10, AP 3, and flat 3 damage, which is a decent profile. They hit on 4s. You can switch their protocol. So you'd lose the 2-up armor and instead go back to 3-up armor, which just depends on what matchup. And you can get weapon skill 2. Not bad.
Yeah, everything in AdMech hits on 2s at all times.
Character isn't here for whatever reason. He's just included in this data sheet. But you're not running him without the Kastelan Robots, so it makes sense. This is the Data Smith. He gives them core if he's nearby. So they actually benefit from ignore AP 1 and 2. They can get, they benefit from Canicles, so they can be -1 to hit in combat. They're decent now. With the points drop, they're pretty decent. They're the best of the Cult Mechanicus units, in my opinion. Even better than the Corpuscarii.
Yep.
However, they've just been hurt by the latest chapter approved, which prevents sub-faction mixing. Because Mark Hertel was running them in the Mars Lucius mix, and I ran that list in a Worm stream game. They really like being allied to efficient Mars shooting, so they have to dedicate their anti-tank to your anti-tank and don't get to deal with the robots in the middle of the board.
Can Punchbots just be Mars, and it's fine?
They can be Mars, but in that case, they're not benefiting from whatchamacallit. In Lucius, you get the +1 save against all those damage 1 weapons, which means you don't have to sit in the... you can sit in the weapon skill 2 protocol if you wanted to.
Yeah, against damage 1.
Yeah.
I think they're all right. I agree with situational but good for their tier. Punchbots, are dope.
They're Cult Mechanicus, and they're core nearby that Data Smith, so you can get access to the Fight Last strat. So it's cool there. They don't have an invuln in combat, though.
People just haven't been running them that much. It is possible that if more people gave them a shot like Mark Hertel did, it's possible they could move up to strong in most lists, but...
Remember what you get in Lucius is that transhuman warlord trait when you're core, and that really helps their defense. That really does help their defense. Because Mars doesn't do a ton for that. So you're probably still running a Mars list, and you want to run lots with that, but... they're not competing with this stuff in my opinion.
They're all right, yeah. And the kind of build that likes them is a whole lot of like very durable targets. They don't want to just be the only durable unit that your opponent can see. So in Mark Hertel's style list, as you were saying, they're focusing on the backfield. They're not focusing on punchbots, running up and punchbotting them. In the more standard Metallica and Mars builds that you're more fond of, they definitely stick out like a sore thumb. Because they are the thing your opponent's going to get to just fire their salvo launchers into.
And we're going to get to it at the end, but the veteran cohort, in my opinion, is the strongest way to play AdMech, and you can't run Cult Mechanicus there. So
you can run the characters.
You can run one of each of the characters, but not
which is enough.
Not the robots. So it does detract from some of the best things that AdMech can do, in my opinion. Now, Scorpius Tank, it is the indirect platform. Predominantly for AdMech, it's strength 5, AP 1, 2 damage. It went down from strength 6, which is really annoying because there's a lot of T3. And its only way to get rerolls, because it's not core, is once again in Mars. And if you run the Engine Seer, you can give it +1 to hit. Yeah. Not bad. It's Skitarii, so it can get additional +1 to hit in the army-wide turn. It comes with 12 stubber shots and then D6 of the strength 7 AP2 D3 damage disruptor missile shots. It's a reasonable boat, but I also found that it just doesn't do very much, and constantly the indirect fire just doesn't perform. AP1 is not great, and on top of that, strength 5 actually really hurts. At one point, I was trying to pick off Evan's Sisters of Silence, and I rolled 6 1s and 2s to wound.
That sounds like the problem's, you.
This was the turn I'm trying to give you a 5 on primary, and I can't even do it with the 2. That was two Scorpius tanks. Both failed to do anything.
It used to be 3 Scorpius would just table you from out of line of sight. They got a lot worse, which is good because indirect fire is not good for the game. I'll say it again.
Not having core is a big deal in these games because, like I mentioned, all those core buffs are so powerful. I think they are, with the Ironstrider, is situational but good. And the situation is you run an Engine Seer, and you probably have 2 of these side by side. And that's what I ran at LVO. Like I said, I just didn't get value for it compared to the other units here.
Yeah. Well, Ruststalkers and Rangers are mint. They're so good.
I just felt like with 145 points, they're just very pricey for what they bring.
Yeah.
I found because you really need this character as well, and he's going to be 55 base plus a Holy Order. So you're starting to look at a very expensive package, like a 400 point package.
Their damage output just ain't where it,
It's not great.
No. You could run the other gun. I saw that.
The Faramite Cannon, it's strength 8 AP 3 damage, but and heavy 3.
Yeah. I've seen people run that. It makes much more sense as like a direct line of fire boat if terrain isn't that heavy. Like I was playing at Warzone Atlanta. I played against him. He had 3 of the boats with the direct line of fire because the terrain density
didn't exist.
Yeah, it was a lot easier to see on those boards, and they were scary. They were not fun. So you could do that too.
All right. Next up is the Onager. It's a tank that's seen even less than the Scorpius tank.
Yep.
It doesn't have indirect fire. Typically, you see the neutron laser version, which is strength 12 AP4 flat 3 plus D3. It's D3 shots though, so it's a little inconsistent.
So it's one shot.
So it's often going to be one shot.
It's just one shot when you need it.
It's not core. It has the same problems as the Scorpius tank. It's cheaper. It's 120 for the neutron laser variant with the Cognus heavy stubber.
That is very cheap.
It's reasonably cheap. It's more durable because it has a 5-up invuln.
But it has more wounds, I believe. It could be
no,
wrong.
it has 1 less.
One less?
I think it's 11 instead of 12.
Those things are 12. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I am also not a fan of it, but if you're running it in specifically Mars, you can make it work.
And that's the point where you stack a whole bunch of vehicles together, and your opponent's like, I did not.
You're going for threat overload on that. Especially good in like a Crusher Stampede type of meta where you just get an Alpha Strike on them with a ton of weapons hitting on 2s, re-rolling a hit and a wound, or 2 hits and a wound. You can do damage there, but
pretty solid.
It doesn't fit into a lot of the lists, in my opinion. This is the transport. I think the transport is also situational but good.
Really?
But I think it's better than these. So
it gives you access to something. I mean, what you use it for is it gives you access to eradication of flesh.
In the Metallica build, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you also just take one of it and you hide it. And you start out a unit in it, especially when, Pteraxii are able to hop out and then jump into reserves.
Yep.
They go very, very far, and then the boat hides in a corner the entire game, and you're just like, all right, well, you got a 15 on eradication of flesh. That's obnoxious. I would have put it at strong in most lists.
Well, here's where I'm going to go with it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Strong in most lists, right?
Right.
Okay.
For sure.
Metallica, and then specifically veteran cohort builds in general, then it is absolutely in most lists, if not a staple. And I would put it as a staple for those melee-oriented builds for multiple reasons. Number one, Jack mentioned it, indirect fire exists in this game. And Skitarii units, one unit's going to have a lot of defense, maybe 2, but outside of that, they're pretty paper thin. So if you're dealing against Hive Guard, if you're dealing with Tau indirect fire now, you need some defense to keep the key units alive.
Yep. A squad of Ruststalkers in there, add 3 inches to the movement, insane movement we were talking about before.
This is a mandatory in the meta, I feel.
So sounds like a tournament staple to me, Six.
It is a tournament staple in this meta.
Right.
And because of those reasons. Because the prevalence of indirect fire, and I feel in this, like Jack mentioned, in the veteran cohort builds, Eradication of the Flesh, you can't always take it because there are several armies that don't have easy to kill troops, or that you might only do it like 3 turns out of the game. So
but there are plenty of
in a meta where
matchups.
sisters were everywhere. It was an amazing secondary. It's a little less good now, but
It's good in Drukhari.
you can still, well, it depends on what Drukhari.
It's true.
Not taking against a thick, heavy build, but against one that's more infantry heavy, sure. If Drukhari goes back to MSU, that helps that secondary. But I like having it as an option. However, it's competing with no prisoners now, and no prisoners is much improved with the extra bonus points now.
That's true. That's true.
It's not as much for that, but it is, the indirect fire makes this absolutely essential for this style of play.
Specifically, it doesn't have indirect fire, but it keeps your units safe from indirect fire.
Yeah, for at least a turn. And because there's Skitarii, they can benefit from the army-wide +1 save, go to a 2-up. T6, pretty difficult to kill. You saw Nick struggle to kill one, even with an auto explosion.
That was, what a moment.
He deserved that.
He did.
So I think it's essential in the veteran cohort builds. Otherwise, it's probably down in this area. But right now, I feel it's very important.
Okay.
For these melee-oriented builds.
Let's get to the planes that all look the same.
Stratoraptor is first. It is, in my opinion, still the best of the planes.
Probably,
in Mars, in particular. It's situational because it has to be in Mars to really work. It's 200 points now with the -1 damage, so it's very pricey. It's only 10 wounds. It doesn't have an invuln.
And they can't threat overload because you can only take two. So it used to be the 6 flyer list was just like, that's too much to deal with. But 2 flyers, you can deal with them. Usually they went up a significant amount of points. They are still insane to try to kill, though. They are still very durable. Specifically
in Mars, because they can get cover and +1 save.
For the team tournament, Siegs wanted to run like 6 AdMech flyers. And I was like, no, Siegs. Here's the reason. You're a better player than that. I don't want you relying on 50-50s of whether I go first or second. Little did I realize AdMech planes were cracked, and they don't die going second. So it's not a 50-50. It's just 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And so me and John put our foot down on that somewhat ignorantly. And, led to Richard going 4-2 at the team tournament. Sorry, buddy. I had to lose a game.
Not
sometime.
only that, you put me into the 6 flyers.
We did.
And
yeah, we put you on how many Ironstriders? 6 or some nonsense.
6 Ironstriders.
We put you on 6 Ironstriders instead of 6 AdMech flyers.
And guess what?
We done goofed.
You think the Ironstriders they go first? They get to hide, shoot away a couple planes, and then they're at tough angles to shoot. Sure, and that's what happened. I put him at tough angles. He went first, came up, killed 1 Ironstrider. So I had 5 left.
That should hurt.
And guess what? 5 Ironstriders did.
Nothing.
They didn't even kill a plane. And I was like, so at the start of the turn, I was like, got this, baby.
Then you did not got this.
And then I was like, oh, only the Rangers killed anything. Awesome.
Yeah.
If the Ironstriders did what they should do on average, I win that game no problem.
I didn't realize that chaff launchers were as insane as they were because I left the AdMechage up to you. I was just like, this is a flyer, no way. Because flyers typically have the problem of if you go first, they have the mobility, they can find angles and shoot. Not even find angles, they just go on top of terrain and shoot through it. But if you go second, they can see you. So it's hyper-teching into trying to go first, because if you go first with 6 flyers, well, now you can only do 2. But if you go first with 6 flyers, every single flyer is seeing them and shooting them, and it sucks. But if you go second, they can see every single flyer and shoot them, and it sucks. So I was like, Siegs, no. I didn't realize that they don't die. I didn't know. I didn't know. Chaff launchers apparently fires out chaff when, for some reason, Fluff fail, by the way, fires out chaff. What this does is after you've been hit, wounded, and failed your save, the chaff pulls the shell back out of the vehicle.
Well, it cuts the shell in half, so you only take half the damage.
Right, obviously. Fluff disaster, and for that I rate them situational, but good.
Yeah. It's still a decent anti-tank platform, but it has the limitations. I prefer the solo Ironstriders, but if you really want the fast attack for the other slots, then you would think about running a flyer as your anti-tank. They're too expensive.
I wouldn't. Yeah, they're expensive and you can't threat overload anymore, so they are much more balanced than they were before.
Next is the bomber.
You're also putting that in situational.
Yep. It still does a lot of mortal wounds, and in a horde meta, you can drop a ton of mortals with little recourse if there's not a lot of anti-tank there, and they can just fly off the board, come down the next turn, just sit in your backfield, and then go do it again. They also have access to the Tremor Shell strat, and if you don't give them chaff launchers, you can get I turn off an aura. You can get the strat to turn off auras.
That's pretty good.
So that package, they're a little cheaper. I believe they're 20 points cheaper than the Stratoraptor.
180.
So they are still very situational, still pricey in my opinion. You're rarely seeing them, but in Mars they are still pretty decent. two bombers showing up is still, hey, I need to actually think about this because this could really slow me. If anti-tank decreases for whatever reason, we start seeing slower armies come back, like in the meta where you see a lot of Dark Angel Terminators, stuff like that. Bombers are a nightmare.
They are. The biggest thing is that they just move block.
Blocking the tremor shells, it's all a nightmare.
It's so frustrating to have to deal with. Yeah, I can agree with that. The Transvector, on the other hand.
Guess what? You probably don't even know what this thing does.
It's a transport.
And
can't it like you split a squad between
it holds
two of
6 models.
What?
6 models. In order to hold more, you need to do a combined landing, so you need to bring 2 of them. And they're 110
so that's
points.
Both of your flyer slots.
That's both your flyer spots, and you can hold now 12 models. And they still have to be 9 away when they come out. It's just an entire...
Wait. How many points are they?
110.
Is that with chaff launchers?
No.
So, like 130 or something with?
Yeah.
So, what guns do they have?
They have just heavy stubbers.
So, they have the same guns as the bomber.
Yep.
So, for 50 points cheaper, you lose the bomb?
If you run the chaff launcher... The bomber without chaff launchers is 150 now, I believe.
Okay.
So, it's 40-point difference.
So, 40 points cheaper. So, the thing is, I don't actually think it's that bad. Because you get all the move blockage. You don't use it as a transport, obviously. That's a joke. But you have all the move blockage. You still have a decent amount of anti-infantry firepower. And it's just... I don't even know if you run them with chaff launchers, to be honest. It's just a 110-point move blocker that's just obnoxious.
Why wouldn't I run 5 Serberys Raiders?
That's a great question. If we compared every unit to Serberys Raiders,
but if you're talking
no unit would be good.
At least that with a move block with the bomber, I'm actually doing multiple different things.
Right. I just don't think it belongs in YGWY.
I think it's it doesn't have a purpose.
2 of them move blocks.
It's supposed to be a transport, and it's a terrible transport.
Right, but
that's YGWY.
Yeah, okay,
that's
sure.
Just textbook YGWY. The transport is a terrible transport.
It doesn't matter if the transport's a terrible transport.
That does matter.
There's plenty of transports that are terrible transports in this game that are decent.
It can't fit models inside of it. That's the base of it.
Yes, but it as a vehicle is not terrible.
It is terrible.
It's not good. It's overcosted. I saw it at LVO. I didn't play into it. Obviously, Manny got to play into that.
The combined landing, baby.
As a transport, I agree. It's beyond YGWY. But as an actual hull for 110 that flies around is just a jerk with 16 heavy stubber shots.
Get the actual transport.
I'm not saying it's better than those. I'm just saying it's an overcosted release.
I'm saying its role is supposed to be a transport.
I understand.
Doesn't have that role.
You're salty that it can't compare to your boy, the Stratoraptor and the Archaeopter. But
this is where
that's all right.
This is where we do the Forge World line. If it had 40k rolls,
yep.
So we're not doing that. What we are doing is the veteran cohort builds. So guess what?
all those Skitarii stuff.
See this stuff?
Moves right up to tournament staple. Boop boop boop. There we go.
And then that all stays
and
the
also
same.
The Sulfur Hounds move up to strong in most lists.
Yep, the Sulfur Hounds move up.
And oh, look at that! There's no more Skitarii units below that, other than the one we don't talk about.
Just the vehicle.
Yeah.
This stuff in veteran cohort, it's already the best stuff AdMech has access to. It dramatically improves. Like I talked about, there's a +1 attack strat. It's amazing. The veteran Vanguard and Rangers get inbuilt +1 leadership, +1 attack. The Rangers, if they don't make a normal move, advance, or fall back that turn, they count as in cover, which is cool to have. But the Vanguard benefit the most. They can't be blasted, so it's still good to run a big squad of them. And on top of that, they get to roll an additional die on their advances. And troops advancing and charging is only 1 CP, and in the +3 inch move turn, you can make that 0 once per game with calculate without diversion. So if you saw any of the games I played with AdMech needs to be in the middle board by turn 3, so that turns 4 and 5 you're taking down your opponent's primary and controlling the middle of the table. That's how I won games. If you watch the game I played against Anthony, that troop unit turn 3 was going up the board, made the charges into the Chronos, got onto his home objective, and then controlled that from there.
Because that's the thing people don't realize. A 20-man ranger unit is a shooting unit, sure. But it's OBSEC, and it does not die in a turn to, like, almost anything. So
and it requires a lot to come out to deal with it.
You can just charge the 20-man unit into combat armies and just be like, yeah, you're not killing the whole thing, and I took your objective and block you and tie you up.
The only reason I was able to beat Evan was he couldn't finish off the 2 20-man units. I had 2 Galatus Dreads on 1 wound on the middle objective, and needed those direct assault stranglehold points, so charged them both in, baby.
He actually did not have 2 Galatus Dreads, Evan, and the way I know that is because I wrote the list, it turns out.
2 Accolus Dreads.
I found out after day 1. He
had 1 Galatus, 2 Accolus.
I know this is a Custodes talk, but whatever. I like to talk.
Yeah.
I found it day one. I'm like, damn, he dropped 3 points the whole day. He's just running people over. And I look at his list and I'm reading it and I'm like, wait a minute, this looks familiar. And I double check and I pull up the list I submitted for the Goonhammer article I wrote and the list that Evan's running. And I'm like, those are point for point identical. And so I actually talked to him later on in the day. He's like, thank you for the list. You know, it's been doing great work. I mean, he did phenomenal work with it. He played it very
army
well.
On direct assault. The only reason I was even remotely in that game was because the Rangers survived more than they should have. And just 5-up invulns that can swing your favor.
Yeah. He had the closest game you've had at a super major, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that was super tight.
Yeah. And
it was a couple 5-up invulns away from swinging the other way.
He played phenomenally, so I'm not taking that away from him. I just thought it was funny.
The ultimate point is you need to use that board control aggressively by turn 3 so that you're in position to win the game. If you just sit in your half of the board, that's not how AdMech plays.
Yeah.
And that's not how you're going to win tough tournament games with it. So this is the tier list ranking for AdMech.
Specifically, this is the tier list after you factor in veteran cohort,
yes.
Which I think you should.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because I think, like I said, that's the most powerful way to play. Advance in Charge just dramatically increases the speed of the army, and all the buffs that you get, even though you pay more points for your basic troops, I believe it's still worth it. So if you watch any of the stream games I played, you've seen the power of the veteran cohort. I don't believe in the Cult Mechanicus stuff. I think it's pretty poor. Not only are Mechanicals not as good as Doctrinas, but the units themselves on their data sheets just don't benefit from some of the amazing warlord traits that Skitarii get access to. So it just, a lot of the love went to Skitarii units and not a lot to the Cult Mechanicus stuff. So they really just need a full reroute of Mechanicals. Or they need more than points. Yeah. Dropping their points isn't reasonable. Corpuscarii at 14 points should be fine. It's just
they just don't do enough.
They don't do enough.
Yeah.
They don't benefit from enough rules. So
I agree. I think if you balance them out, if you make the cult stuff better and you make the Skitarii stuff a little worse, I think you'd have a very flexible army on your hands, and it might even end up being better than it was before.
Right now, it is Codex Skitarii.
It really is Codex Skitarii. We've been having a lot of fun doing these tier lists for the factions, so I think it's we are doing tier lists for pretty much every major faction at this point, but it's gonna take a while.
Yeah, it'll take a little while. I did Necrons, like 2 weeks ago. We just did AdMech. I'll probably be doing Tau soon since they got a new book. A good time to analyze it. There's a lot of good data sheets in there. But thanks so much for joining us, Shogun Jim. Welcome to your AdWar membership. Really glad to have you here. And if you ever want to check out the membership tiers that we have the basic one, which gets you access to the strategy sessions that we do in the War Room each week, as well as all the other membership benefits like the Discord access, where Jack and I are in there constantly talking about lists, posting things,
talking
the
trash,
conversation going. A little bit of talking trash,
a little bit of smack talk.
A lot of other top players are in there, and then we've got the podcast here, and then the full War Room is finally on YouTube. So if you want all the War Room games, the coaching games that we play, Jack and I later tonight are going to be playing some Tau into Custodes. So that's going to be a good teaching game. Neither of us have played this matchup.
No, we just theorized. That's about it.
We're also playing the new missions, getting used to them. So a lot of learning that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody for joining us. Really appreciate the support. Hope you enjoyed this tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Hopefully AdMech will eventually get a Forge World line with 40k rolls. But until now, they're just gorgeous looking models. But yeah, thanks everybody, and we will see you next time. We're going to send you off for a promo of that War Room.
Bye-bye.
There's so many rules in 40k, hundreds of events, and constant updates. Skip the learning curve of Warhammer and join the pros. Art of War is led by multiple world champions with decades of success. We teach clinics, stream games, and inspire you to succeed at your favorite hobby. Join our global community of gamers just like you.